Good afternoon to everyone present here. I cordially welcome you all to Tech Bharat 2021, Empowering EduTech and Health Tech. Tech Bharat is an initiative of Lahu Udyog Bharati, Karnataka, and IMS Foundation. Tech Bharat is envisioned as a platform to support startups and SMEs and be a guiding light to them in navigating their entrepreneurial journey. We thank the Government of Karnataka and Government of India in supporting and encouraging our vision. We welcome you to this session on organizing medical education and health infrastructure in India, making healthcare innovative in its affordability and accessibility is the biggest challenge the world continues to face. Again, skilling or developing healthcare resources is the biggest challenge as well as an opportunity worldwide. India is the fastest growing trillion dollar economy in the world and the fifth largest overall, and it possesses, as never before, a sophisticated arsenal of technologies and knowledge required for providing healthcare to her people. Yet, the gaps in health outcomes continue to widen. To discuss this further, we have an eminent panel with us today. Firstly, I would like to introduce Dr. M.A. Balasubramania. He is an advisor of community processes and comprehensive primary healthcare, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. He is an anesthesiologist and social worker. At 17, inspired by the teachings of Swami Vivekananda, he joined a group of friends who founded in 1984 the nationally acclaimed registered non-profit organization Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement. The organization now serves directly more than 3 million people through its 9 institutions and 43 programs in health, education, socio-economic empowerment, training, and research. In April 2018, he successfully transitioned the operational leadership to a second generation team of five. Presently, he is the secretary of the organization. He has played a key role in rehabilitation and resettlement of forest-based tribes of HD Kote Taluk in Mysuru district of Karnataka. He has pioneered public-private partnership initiatives, some of which are national models in the sectors of health, especially HIV/AIDS, emergency medicine, palliative care, and non-profit management. A heartfelt thanks to you, sir, for accepting to moderate this session, and we welcome you to this session.
Thank you very much. Namaste.
We have Dr. M. Vijay Kumar, Vice Chancellor of Yenapoya University, Mangalore, with us today. A surgical oncologist, he has been providing dedicated medical service to the people for the last 30 years as a surgeon, teacher, and educationist. He was conferred the honorary fellowship of the Royal College of Surgeons by the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, Glasgow. We are honored to have you here, sir, and welcome you. We have Dr. Ranganath, Professor and HOD, Bangalore Medical College and Research Institute. He specialized in community medicine and is presently the in charge of the COVID vaccination center at Victoria Hospital, Bangalore. We thank you for accepting our invitation and welcome you, sir. We also have Dr. Vasudha Kulkarni, Associate Professor, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Medical College with us today. She is a professor of anatomy and has several research papers and patents published in the. We cordially welcome you to this session, sir.
Namaste.
Madam. I now request Dr. Balasubramanian to take over the session and moderate it. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vishugupta. It is indeed a privilege and an honor to be part of this August panel on the occasion of Tech Bharat, which by itself is quite creative and innovative and inclusive in its approach. I, at this point of time, welcome each of the panelists, Professor Vijay Kumar, Professor Ranganath, as well as Professor Vasudha Kulkarni for this important event. Well, this year has been eventful in many, many ways. And I'm sure while there is empathy and sympathy pouring in all directions, it is equally has been a challenging arena, both as doctors as well as educationists being in this panel. Because both of these have challenged each one of you and your entire team while carrying out this task. So COVID has been a great challenger on one side. On the other side, I would see COVID as a great opportunity, which has redefined the way our entire fraternity has started conducting itself, the way the entire fraternity is being recognized in the system, and the way health sector has got the prominence in recent times. I can even say honestly, sitting at Government of India, I'm able to see the entire 36 states and union territories. And this is the time, and this year, virtually every state has been able to get every post of theirs formalized. There's a mass recruitment drive. The only department or sector to which the Ministry of Finance has not cut funds is health. On the contrary, it has increased funds for health sector. In that context, it has been an opportunity for all of us also to redeem the nobility of the profession, to redeem the attention that is due for it for so long, to have been brought back into it. Now, coming back onto this important element, it is also in a time when the country is completely redefining the way healthcare infrastructure and medical education sector is being looked at. Today in this country, we have 554 medical colleges, totaling to nearly about 83,000 students. And all of you are from Karnataka, so am I. And I can proudly say Karnataka has the highest number of colleges too. We have 60 colleges now. And though one college has not admitted students as of now, and it is due for at any time, the number says that we have got 9,345 students enrolled in medical education in Karnataka itself. So you can now dream that every year we'll be actually churning out 10,000 students on the road. Ayushman Bharat by itself has actually brought in a complete redefinition of the entire healthcare infrastructure in this country, because every sub-center and primary health center, whether it's in rural areas or in urban areas, are being transformed into health and wellness centers. And on top of it, a first time a new cadre of, I would say, support systems have been brought in the name of community health officers and mid-level healthcare providers, and ensured that closest to the people, that is at the sub-health center level, for every 5,000 population, you have a mid-level healthcare provider who has been supported by the PHC medical officer to dispense medicines, enable diagnosis for not just one illness, but a plethora of issues, right from emergency care to palliative care. Virtually, you can say from womb to tomb, everything is being provided closest to the people today. And not only that, we have been long as medical education being very, very reductionist in our approach, looking at disease as an important entity. And we thought that this is the only thing that we need to manage. For the first time, the transformation has come in to look at wellness as an important component. In fact, at one point of time, one of our health secretaries in Karnataka, who is now the CM secretary, Mr. Dr. E.V. Ramana Reddy, I don't know how many of you are aware of him. In my interaction with him, he jokingly said, I'm an agriculture doctor. I've come into this place and I'm stunned by one statement that he made, which was a very insightful statement. He said, I all along talked about harvest. I all along talked about productivity. And these were the things that were actually mapped as indicators. But I've come to a department where you only track deaths, disease, mortality, morbidities. These are your parameters. I'm really looking at where is wellness and where is happiness here. You're only talking about disease and death. Okay, and we have forgotten. But fortunately for us, subsequent to the National Health Policy in 2017, that has been brought back into the mainstream discussions. And all these sub-centers and health PHCs are now being transformed into Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Centers, where Fit India, Eat Right, all are becoming important campaigns in the community level, looking at right from yoga classes to Zumba dances to actually looking at taking Eat Right as a campaign mode with an Eat Right toolkit by an ASHA taking it to every household. So there is a big change that has been brought about. So that was the redefinition health and policy, national health policy brought in. But has it changed the way the doctors are trained or the doctors are made in the medical college? I think I will now talk to you on those issues. How are we grooming our medical students in this medical education for the new India that we are talking about, where wellness is an important element and not just disease, where we look at all dimensions of healthcare from physical, mental, social, economic, spiritual, all dimensions have to be looked at. There's a lot more coordination that is looked at. And most important thing, you're all as medical college professors are churning out primary care physicians. The national health policy has put primary health care as the top of the agenda. In fact, it clearly talks about not only enhancing the healthcare spending to 2.5% of the GDP, we are nowhere near that, but it also emphasizes that the 2/3 of the budget will be spent on primary health care. Okay. So with COVID challenging you, the new India demanding you, okay, the new scenario opening up at the grassroots level, what are you actually enabling within the college atmosphere to ensure that we will be able to reach out to this? This is the question I would like all of you to be answering to start off with, to understand whether the new India and the national health policy in amidst the COVID challenges, how has it been transformative and how are you leverage technology? I want to emphasize technology here because each of the Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Center has enhanced the drugs, enhanced the diagnostics at point of care this one. It has got commissioned teleconsultation links from the sub-health center level up to the medical college level, which could be a hub for many of this one. What was only focused on reproductive and child health, which was mostly a physiological parameter, to now we are talking about non-communicable diseases, mental health, elderly care, emergency care, etc. So how do you think technology can be supportive and how do we equip our students to actually emerge in the new India is what I would be interested in understanding it. I'm sure each of you would give us a wealth of information to understand it better. So may I now request each of the panelists, starting from Dr. Vijay Kumar, and then followed by Madam Kulkarni, and then Dr. Rangnath, to kindly say the initial words about what you feel about this.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It was nice to meet you all, and I thank Ek Bharat for selecting me to be a panelist here. I come from the non-communicable disease background, cancer, and I have been working for now 36 years, and I am continuing to teach and treat patients about cancer. Why I said that is, by doing so, I realized one thing over a period of time, that a lot of money we are spending on treating patients, but at the end of the day, neither the patient is happy, nor his relative is happy. If we ask ourselves, even we are not happy. Then I realized, thanks to my stint at Deloitte Cancer Institute, which is one of the regional cancer centers.
Rangnath, your voice is coming on the position. Sorry. Okay.
Yes. See, sorry. When I try to say this, I have a point to make. In 2017 to 18, when the ICMR came out with the data, they said less than 12% of cancer patients getting treated in India belong to the early stage, making a point that 88% of them are in an advanced stage, do what we need, And however much we spend, both time, money, and effort, ultimate outcome is not going to improve unless we catch them early. And if we can make that 12% to become 24% at least, it's a big number, you all know it. But I'm just telling as a dream. 12% to become 24%, that is every fourth person whom we are treating in any cancer hospital in India will be early. But when we try to do all this, who has to do this job? We as doctors are interested only in treating patients and not preventing diseases, and we expect somebody else to do a job of early detection and send it to us. That's where the problem here is. Are the community medicine people doing the job? Public health people department doing the job? No, there is no organized program going on in this country as far as non-communicable disease is concerned. Till very recently, that when LPCVS program came into the picture, which took last 5 years back or 10 years back, it came in. Till that time, it was NCCP, National Cancer Control Program. Then it was amalgamated into non-communicable disease wherein stroke, heart diseases, diabetes, and cancer were clubbed, and we were trying to look at this to that form. But having said all this, how far we are moving in the medical colleges to achieve this in the medical education? Yes, community medicine department, etc., are aware of this NPCS program, and they are trying to go with the government agencies. And I am very proud to say one of them is NPA Medical College, where we are in touch and we are collaborating with the district administration to achieve this. But I am coming to the medical education. When it comes to medical education, as pointed out by Dr. Balasubramanian, who is moderating today, the good old way of treating patients is only continuing. Irrespective of the fact we have brought in recently the CBMB, that is the competency-based medical education, has been rolled out. The first year is ready, and then those people, when they go to the second year, they will take over the competency-based medical education of the second year and go on. But having said all that, the early clinical experience, etc., that is only keeping in mind stimulating the young minds to treat patients. Again, nobody is looking at the community at large. Nobody is looking at the primary health centers, which are now trying to become health and wellness centers. Because 40 years ago, when I was posted in PHC, I had such an experience where I would not like to go. Same scenario is not existing today, no doubt. No stock medicines are not there, and it is distributed like prasad, not as per science, but by their availability. But things have changed a lot in the last 4 decades. I'm happy to see that this is happening. But we will have to incorporate these community outreach programs, which I am sitting and doing today in the NFIR. It should be a part and parcel of medical education. We should give more importance to the preventive detection and early detection of diseases so that we can effectively treat. And as pointed out, from morbidity and mortality, probably the yardstick should change towards healthness and wellness, and that is how we have to move. But having said that, how much we are moving is the point which Dr. Balasubramanian is asking us. I don't think we are moving an inch, if you ask me, but competency-based medical education batch is going up. When they come to the final year, probably we'll know where we stand. With this introductory note, I open up for the discussions in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Kumar, highlighting the importance of public health in the new era and also bringing into the forefront the issue of competency-based medical education that has been just kick-started in this. I'm sure the entry point for that has been anatomy, and Professor Vasudha Kulkarni would be able to throw more light on it. And yes, how during COVID, in a new environment of medical education, both in terms of the curricular design as well as in terms of the environmental design. Okay, how did you manage this year?
At the outset, my sincere thanks to Tech Bharat India, which has given me this opportunity to share a panel with eminent speakers like you. At the outset, yes, National Medical Council of India, that is National Medical Commission, has come to force from September 25th, 2020, and it has repealed nearly 64-year-old Indian Medical Council Act. Right. So this, however, when it comes to the change, a paradigm shift in medical education, the traditional curriculum, which was existing for almost 34 years, has now revamped itself into what is called as competency-based medical education. So with your introductory remarks, you highlighted on two important things: the role of extracurricular activities to be emphasized as well-being of an individual. This has also been given importance to students who learn in a medical school. So unlike previous curriculum, there are dedicated hours, 22 hours distributed over entire 1 year for the student, wherein we are accountable to show that the students practice sports and extracurricular activities. So that is one way of ensuring that our students also are fit enough to take up this course. So as far as the quality of medical education is concerned, there is a paradigm shift from traditional curriculum to that of competency-based medical education. So all these years, the emphasis was on, is focused more on teacher-centric approach, but now it is shifted to learner-centric approach. So emphasis is more given to their learning rather than our teaching. So we are also directing them towards what is called a self-directed learning. We are imparting in them dedicated hours. For example, for anatomy, we have dedicated 25 hours of self-directed learning. By this, what are we doing? We are ensuring that our students are getting converted into what is called as lifelong learners. Now, that is the demand of a health professional. An Indian medical graduate should be also a leader and a lifelong learner. That's one way of ensuring that. And in addition to this, the new curriculum that is competency-based medical education emphasizes on outcome-based approach. Now, all these years, the importance was on knowledge. We were teaching them, and mostly it was lectures, even at the bedside. Most of the teaching was on pathogenesis, management of a case. And I won't say that there was no emphasis on clinical skills and science, but teaching, it was more of knowledge-based learning. However, now competency-based medical education emphasizes more on the skills as well as in addition to knowledge. And one more thing which has brought into forefront is attitude, ethics, and communication. Now, this was a part of hidden curriculum all these years. So, not that we didn't get trained ourselves as doctors without knowing how to interact with patient or patient subjects. However, there is definitely a need to teach our students how to communicate with patients, how to communicate with the relatives of patients, how to break a bad news. All this has to be taught, and as a dedicated 140 hours of attitude, ethics, and communication has been incorporated into this competency-based medical education. Thereby, our medical students are equipped not only with knowledge, also with their attitudes, ethics, and communication skills. In addition, the psychomotor skills, what I meant to say is that every year there are definitive skills which is to be acquired by a medical student. All these years, we never assessed whether the medical student is capable of giving an intramuscular injection. All these years, we never assessed whether a medical student is able to perform a high performance cardiopulmonary resuscitation. We never assessed a medical student would be on field able to manage an airway in an emergency. But now it is a part of skill. This skill has to be certified. So this is the era of what is called as competency-based medical education. And I believe we are very positive in rolling out this. Of course, there were hiccups and challenges. There were two kinds of challenges. First kind of challenges would be reluctance of the senior faculty and most of the faculty to come out of their shells and this new kind of curriculum. They would always say that what is wrong with the present curriculum? We have been doing, aren't we good doctors? Aren't we doing well? But let us be abreast with the global scenario. And World Federation of Medical Education would say that by around 2025, we should be getting affiliated. I mean, our Indian universities should be affiliated to on par with other global universities. That would be possible only if our Indian medical graduates are competency based. They would be competent enough to handle it. So this is what, and that was main hiccup which we could come across. Now with COVID, definitely hats off to our teachers who could adapt themselves to learning management systems. They were quick enough to handle the classes online, and though there were technical issues, though they had difficulty in preparation of PowerPoint presentations or uploading the videos, they were fast enough to adapt, as fast as students to learn and to adapt to the learning management systems. And we could effectively take online classes for the students, except for the skill part, which definitely we wanted them to come offline and handle it. And we could also successfully roll out competency-based medical education curriculum for the first year effectively. And we are moving ahead for the second year. Thank you for this time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Vasudha Kulkarni. In fact, it was very, very informative and educative for all of us. And really appreciate your teamwork in ensuring that you could adapt to your learning management system so fast. And I'm sure learning management throws up another challenge also, because everything is tracked, right? The time that you log in, time you log out, the number of times the people have attempted, everything is logged in. So it also brings in a closer scrutiny on both the provider as well as the receiver. I would be coming back to you on understanding how are you tracking it, how are you managing it, and what is the response of your team on that. Yeah. So Professor Rangnath, I think I need not explain more about you, for the simple reason you have been in the thick of Karnataka's COVID movement. Okay. From the day the COVID was actually started becoming a big issue in Karnataka, and probably Karnataka lagged behind the entire country in terms of the pace at which it ticked off initially, but bounced back impeccably. I would say something that probably the whole country could learn and have complete control of the system. And being a public health, I would say, activist in that way, not only as a professor, but also going onto the ground to actually deliver things there. I think we would count on you on an enormous experience of how you managed the epidemic, your education, and technology to co-opted ideally for you to deliver.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words. I thank Tech Bharat 2021 for this giving opportunity to share my experience. Thank you, sir. With respect to the today's topic, the organizing medical education infrastructure with this COVID pandemic. Yes, India, the world's most populous country, the fast-growing economics, and is a home for millions of people with a diverse socio-cultural, religious, ethical, and linguistic economic background. The diversity in India is unique. In short, the India is epitome of world. India faces both unique challenges and unprecedented opportunities in the sphere of taking health problems. We all know health is a multidimensional. It depends upon various factors like economy, the cultural practices, the environmental conditions, accounting for existing socio-economic disparity, the climatic change, the urbanization, the mass movement of people from this rural to urban areas. All this brings this under a sedentary lifestyle. All this change the disease pattern from this, the communicable to the non-communicable, as our Professor Dr. Vijay Kumar said was telling this. The preventive aspect of disease at most is a given equal importance as well as the curative. In the current COVID-19, the ongoing pandemic, it has brought a challenges to tackle with the existing resources, either in the medical education or in the health sector, as well as to improvise and upgrade the strengthenees to fight back this pandemic successfully, which is possible only by the multi-sectorial amalgamation of health sector and other departments like IT, police department, transport, and other common platforms. So today, technology has a role in healthcare as expanding and improving the health and to increase the provider's capability and the patient access while improving the quality of life for some patients and saving the life of others. The health IT, it improves the quality of healthcare deliveries, it increases the patient safety, decreases the medical errors, strengthening and interaction between the patient and the healthcare providers. India has never been behind in its constantly improving this upgrade. The medical colleges are redefining their curriculum during this COVID pandemic to bring back both in new innovations, as Madam Dr. Vasudha was telling, and their curriculum to bring the newer innovations and the current technology in the education systems. The aim of this felicitation, the facilities to learning and to impart the knowledge. So with this Rajiv Gandhi University as a platform, this Rajiv Gandhi University and Government of Karnataka together, they used this in a COVID pandemic. It has helped a lot in disseminating and training of these activities. With the permission of Rajiv Gandhi, and I would like to share how we have used this technology in the COVID pandemic. We did this with the help of Rajiv Gandhi University. Yeah, the COVID pandemic has been a major destructive change to the medical education across the world, as we all know. Anytime, anywhere aspect of this technology has been rapidly and innovatively used, and an attempt to maintain the teaching and learning. There are significant benefits of this transformative changes, but there are important challenges that need to be addressed. As we know, in the beginning, from the March 2020 onwards, when we started with this COVID pandemic, we were known little about the fact of the disease. The challenges like we are not much understand the disease pattern, the changing treatment. Every week they used to give the different treatment guidelines. Dissemination of treatment protocol to the every corner of the state was a Herculean task. Dissemination of health education and the COVID awareness to the public was a challenge. Continued academic calendar, because from the university side, because medical education training, that was a academic calendar of event, that was another challenge. And in the COVID-19 hospitals with less patients, the healthcare professionals are duty, those who are doing this COVID duty, they are getting infected. That was the workforce was getting smaller and smaller. Introducing the competency-based curriculum in the examinations in the Rajiv Gandhi in the curriculum. Shifting from this offline to the online mode, because as the COVID pandemic, so we are not able to congress the students who adopted this. These are the challenge. Conducting of examinations is a great challenge. Training of healthcare professionals, how to, before sending our doctors or warriors to this COVID ward, how it should be, either taking this, wearing from the PPE to this donning, doffing, and the way to dispose the biomedical. These are all the big challenges. We were under the Rajiv Gandhi platform, we were part of this and we are using this technology. Rajiv Gandhi initiated a lot of training programs. We were all part of this and we are prepared for this SOPs. Because to maintain the standard uniform, there should be a SOPs. So these SOPs are prepared with the help of consultancy. All those consultants in the respective places, under one platform. So Rajiv Gandhi, under this IT using enabling, we bring this all the expertise and they collectively opinion and they made it as SOP under Government of Karnataka and BBMP. We prepared and we are disseminating this. Under this, using this technology through Rajiv Gandhi, we have conducted the 19 mortality audits. So every hospital, those who are admitting these COVID care centers or the other things, we used to every day, every week, we used to organize the death audits. So by sitting in this COVID app in the war room, we used to do this. And so that this was giving a light regarding this, how to manage this further scenario. There are more than 25 clinical expert committees. There are a lot of expertise, maybe psychiatrists, maybe cardiologists, pulmonologists, and other expertise we used to call and we used to get this expertise and the meeting was conducted. There are many technical advisory committee meetings and IEC platforms are conducted through this Rajiv Gandhi. So by using this technology. So during training, there was online training, dissemination of materials by e-posters, hands-on training, come workshop. I said we prepared the locally prepared this media regarding the small videos like how to disinfect, how to sanitize this our own working places, or how to use this, the PPE, what is the disposal. All these things were hands-on training. The small videos were given and prepared from the Rajiv Gandhi and disseminated through our area. That's how you could able to tackle this issue in this part of Karnataka. The panel, lots and lots of panel discussion, calling this expertise, psychiatrists, sociologists, all those are called to this platform and answer the question answer sessions conducted. The live demo of specimen collection, this was the biggest challenge. In the most of them, you are not aware how to collect the samples. Of course, anybody can collect a sample in a clinical setup, but in an open area, in a roadside, we have to establish more and more collection centers in the roadside, bus stops, near religious centers. We have to collect. So how to collect this sample, how to transport safely. So this is a big issue. Those by expertise, we are able to do this by using this technology. And documentation is also an important. We did this. And telemedicine. So people who have a milder cases, we used to admit in the home isolation cases. For those home isolation, without touching or seeing the patients, through videos or through telephonic calls, we used to inquire through dedicated lines, how are you, how are you feeling, what medications have you taken. So the training and tackling, thus we did it through telemedicines. So training of doctors, not only doctors, dentists and nursing. So these are like healthcare is a supportive team. It is a teamwork. So as Madam Dr. Vasudha was telling, it's a teamwork. We have to train our medical students as a team leader, as a manager. So that was a big challenge that we did it. So community surveillance is the biggest. So during this March, April, May, as the cases were going on, most of the medical college and my fellow colleagues were in the field, in the hot sun, going house to house and with their team members and finding this any new cases and reporting to the local bodies. That was a big challenge that we did it. Training of house to house, housekeeping staff, that was the biggest, that was the most neglected, but that is required. The group D workers or the sweepers, the fellow working in the COVID wards. So those people should be taught how to mop this, what percentage of strength should be used, how to wear this PPE, how to dispose it. These are the biggest task that we did it. Training of this training on physical stress and management. When the world was suffering with this, the COVID-19, the work from home concept has come. So that time that has created a lot of the psychiatric or the psychiatric mild or moderate stress. So that time we brought the psychiatrist, and through them the short and the messages used to give us like how to manage or how to cope up with the stress, because away from the family, isolation, child, mother, father, away from the parents, many of them, they were not able to attend their last funerals. There was a touching scenarios. We have witnessed a lot of such cases. In such case, how the people should be behave, and those with the help of technology through Rajiv Gandhi, we were able to do this. Training of not only medical, training of this Ayush, other physiotherapy, pharmacists, all those people were trained with this. Critical care management and ICU and ventilators. We all know this during this initial months, the oxygen therapy was the only that is high flow oxygen. So we used to train through this, how much oxygen should be given. What is this high nasal flow cannula, how to put this, how to measure this, oxygen strength, how much to be given. All these things were training this. The most important is the biomedical waste. After giving this, treating the patient, the lots of biomedical waste generated, that how to handle this, who has to collect. In the hospital facility, of course, there are biomedical waste agreements and other things. But in the home care, lot of containment centers, COVID care centers, the big challenge was biomedical. So the SOPs were prepared with the help of expertise that were able to do this with the help of using this technology. And we used a lot of NSS program officers through these universities. They helped a lot by booking this NSS volunteers and other as a volunteer basis. Training of police officers, training of the COVID-19 warriors, and more so the medico-legal aspects. There are many issues. The patient who are suffering with or without the COVID, when the death happened, there is a lot of controversies, whether to do the post-mortem or not. So in that, what is this? There are so many financial aspects, so many things were there. So in that, with the help of expertise, we were able to do this. The medico-legal consultants and training those given regarding what are the things in par with Government of India and Government of Karnataka guidelines. The maintaining of this, the stress management, because many of these patients were mild symptomatic, kept in a home isolation. In that case, stress management was the most important task. So with the help of local bodies, we used to call the person by name team, and we used to inquire there, and we used to support them as we all with you. Don't worry, if there is any conditions, you can shift it to the nearby COVID care center, something like this. Such activities are carried out. Mainly the training of undergraduates and interns. When you are lacking this manpower, the university has permitted us, and the Medical Council of India permitted to use the medical students and postgraduate interns. We also, many of the medical colleges, we are given a training to this in a batch wise, to how to handle this COVID situation, what are the precautions we supposed to take, all those trainings were given. So the last part is training and vaccination. Now the vaccination has come. So this we are all part of this one. So this vaccine, what is that? What are the key messages to be given during vaccination? What is the observation period? And what is the AEFI? Where to report? All those things we were trained, and we were giving this under this Rajiv Gandhi platform series. So during these things, it was not easy task. So there are many modifications, short-term, long-term changes we are made. As Madam Dr. Vasudha was telling, so in the medical colleges, the changing calendar of events. So the course was 6 months for the postgraduates. Many of the postgraduates, they used to complain, sir, our term was 3 years. I'm a surgeon. I didn't get any a single chance to cut. So I'm lacking of the surgical skill. So medicine PG, pediatric PG, gynec PGs were just shorting because there are no clinical facilities. So we are suffering those. There is changing of calendar of events to minimize the pandemic. Digital evaluation. The Rajiv Gandhi has said that instead of calling all the examiners to one place, they made this, whatever the theory paper or postgraduates, they write on this, that has to be evaluated by digitally. Introduction of online evaluation, that was another thing. Theory and practical exams are conducted by maintaining the social distance. Need for relooking of this current practical examination, that is online, by adopting this, the practical way was conducted by, because we are getting the problem with the patients. To conduct the exams, getting the patients was the big problem. The case scenarios and other such innovative things are made, and conducted these practical exams. Introduction of digital evaluation and answer script. Then and there itself, after the exams are over, so we used to scan the paper and then and there, so that the paper shifting and other things that was avoided in that way. So this technology was used in the curriculum and the medical education. We tried our level best and with the maintaining the social distance and all, and we were able to conduct some of these exams and other without any much problem. With respect to this, the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure was lacking in many of the medical colleges for digital healthcare in a hospital. The problem with this designing and software, we may have a lot of softwares. For example, if you take a patient like, I'll give a small example, a patient like Gangamma. It's a hypothetical situation. If the patient by name Gangamma, if she come to this hospital for a adolescent, so then we have a RCH portal. If the same Gangamma after some period, when she become a pregnant or antenatal care, that is a registration, that is a separate. If the same patient by name Gangamma, if you develop a tuberculosis, we have an Ikshaya. If the same patient Gangamma, if you develop a HIV, she have a SIMS portal. If you have the same Gangamma, if you go for the fire operation for hysterectomy, so we have a ABRK portal. So we have womb to tomb, we have a lot of apps, we have a lot of services, but the challenge is we have to sit with this expertise like software, hardware. You have to maintain the integration. So that has to be incorporated, then only, so it will be very easier. I feel the technology is there, but thing is, just like our ATM card or just like our metro card, if a person can have a single metro card, when the person go to this, either let it go to the private or government, whatever the illness or whatever the treating physician has, that should be entered and should give it back to this. So that the next time when you go to any health center, if that same data with the same card, you can put it into his laptop or his desktop, and you can see this. Yeah, this patient has 3 years back, he has this hysterectomy or something like this. So this could be easy for the professor like Vijay Kumar sir to treat the person. So what was his past history? So we expect this type. This could be one of the easiest method. We expect this type of services to be available. So this type of integration of data that is required. But the issue is maybe initial to make these e-hospitals or e-services or e-Sanjeevani services, e-OPDs, the collection of data, the storage, the infrastructure, and the security, that could be the issue. I think that is not a big issue that can be tackled, but it is the time, so that has to be taken. So all the patients, the history should be the clinical health records and the digital record that should be made, and that will make easy for the treating physician to provide the better healthcare services. So we should train our medical student in such a way that they should be these skills. So
do you think that this is happening on the current?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll come back to this. So this is a clear-cut lacking of the life-saving skills in undergraduate teaching. So as Madam was telling this, rightly, the managerial and administrative skill. I said the Indian medical graduate should be trained in a leader, communicator, then lifelong learner, then as a professionist. For example, if we train a good surgeon, that is not sufficient. If we train one physician, an expert training is not sufficient. So the physician or a surgeon, he should know this, how to organize a camp, how to organize an immunization camp, how to organize a family planning camp, how to organize the COVID vaccination camp. So we should train, because the healthcare is a teamwork. It is not possible by one team. So we have to train our medical student in such a way that either by using this ASCII or ASPE, I think the current NMC and the medical bill, it has already implemented this curriculum in this. So we are slowly, as the madam and the sir was telling, so the competency based skill we are implementing now in the phased manner. The time only has to tell whether we are implemented successfully or any changes has to be done. That will be dealing with this. Thank you for giving opportunity to share my experience. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Rangnath. In fact, it's quite an interesting proposition that we have actually gone into technology in multiple streams during COVID as well as before COVID, and we have started appreciating the value of it. The greater challenges that might emerge in future is with respect to equipping our monitoring systems to ensure that we are able to deliver it, I would say track what we are doing or not doing. Because, you know, technology throws in a lot of data. How do we manage the data? How do you make an assessment? And I'm sure private universities like Enopaya would also be quite interested in actually managing these issues. Can I understand from Professor Vijay Kumar, how have you looked at digital technology and students' assessment?
Thank you. I think we are one of the very few universities way forward, I would say. Before even the COVID could come, 5-6 years ago, we have started using e-learning as our motto. And we use some of the tools called Engage, Backbone, and then we started using the online test as a part and parcel of our teaching and learning process 5 years back. And this COVID only fortified us and also made us go much more aggressive on these e-learning platforms, which I repeat, we have been doing it for the last 5 years and more. This is number one. Number two, assessment of such a e-learning was another issue. See, this made me come back and see that they are randomly asked so that they do not stay away from their classes, even online, and that can be checked. And online test we started conducting regularly, and then the test will be not only attendance, but this test will also tell them that they are how much they have attended. Third thing what we did was, more importantly, the people who are sincerely said they are not able to take the classes because of their connectivity problem, etc. The recorded classes were shown again. They were asked to take the recorded classes, and also the case-based discussions which went on, particularly from the postgraduate and the clinical posting people. We concentrated on that. And the most important thing came was about the online examination. It was a challenge. I was not sure whether this online examination will go copy-free. I was worried as an old timer. Either it should be on the book, open book exam, or otherwise. But whereas the UGC has accepted for open book exam for their affiliated colleges, but the Medical Council of India and later on NMC specifically said their advisory how to conduct the exam for postgraduates and then went on to do that for the undergraduates also, which was touched upon by Dr. Ramana. The same thing was done here. Only thing is, we wanted how the examination of 150 students to be going on by Vigilator. So, invigilator for one invigilator for 10 students were made, and that group was checked by us every time that there is no malpractice in inverted commas, malpractice goes on, and that way we were able to maintain the standard of not only learning and teaching process, but the sanctity of the test and the examination and evaluation also. But evaluation, when you take it, we have already introduced the digital evaluation almost 2 years ago, wherein the moment the examination, written examination is done, the papers are immediately scanned within 1 hour, they are uploaded, afterwards nobody can touch. It's frozen, nothing can be done. But the advantage of this the digital evaluation was, at a time, even the 4 examiners, both 2 internals and 2 externals, can at a time see and evaluate, not waiting for the physically, the hard copies to move from table to table. That was the second thing we did. And I'm aware that it has been done by Rajiv Gandhi also, but different centers, even Bangalore is one of the centers for Rajiv Gandhi. I'm aware of it. But we could do that effectively because ours is that being a deemed university is easy, the number of constituent college not more than 10. The last but not the least is about the skill-based learning, which was touched upon by Dr. Ramana. I am a surgeon, as I said, I'm a cancer surgeon. So I was really worried. Last 9 months, these boys have not seen or they may not have cut because non-COVID patients are not getting admitted even if we wanted to. And they were worried about coming to these hospitals which have been declared as COVID hospital was an issue. So how to go about it, I was worried. 2 things I did. Being a clinician, I said, divide the hospital into 2. One block was called as COVID, the other block was called non-COVID to try to get these patients all around to see, take their confidence level so that they are not mixed with the COVID patient. That is their worry. So we said we did it and identify the student OTs separately for the COVID and non-COVID, and the teaching and learning process for not only the students, postgraduates, but also for the healthcare workers who are done. And the outcome was assessed by us by 1 way. 240 people became positive in our university campus, starting from doctors to technicians. I'm proud to say they all came early and we didn't lose anyone down. They didn't go for a ventilator also. This was made possible because we were anticipating and teaching them how to go about, as was explained in detail by Dr. Ramana. Not only by PP adopting and donning, but also other aspects of the COVID was explained, they could come. And we as a private university went 1 step ahead. We covered them for 3 lakhs of rupees treatment, including COVID, and we could take the burden on the university, not by the individuals who were own friend working. Because after that particular date, I forgot, after that, the government of India was not going to support. They said, so we were worried. All healthcare workers were insured from our side, and up to 3 lakhs of rupees, including COVID treatment, was done free of cost for them, insured through the third-party insurance companies. This is for the healthcare component. Coming to the students back about skill-based training, I told you, I decided to develop the modules for them and insisted that the undergraduate students and postgraduate students get some exposure on training, skill-based training. So we concentrated on the postgraduates first. So we were specifically developing modules, online modules, and then we used maximum capability of our simulation centers. I have to proudly say it's one of the best simulation centers in this country. Established 5 years ago was ours and is ours. So we could use maximum utility of that. And then I said the children will start thinking that it's a video game. So they have to come and touch the tissue. So I moved them from there to the pelvic trainers. Then I asked them to teach on lively brought poultry tissue, how to cut and stitch was taught. Then I took them to live porcine models, meaning large animal models, live surgery. I am one of the very few centers in the country to get the Government of India clearance licensing for large animal facility where we can use it for live surgical training. And that is what we did it effectively. Now I am going to Cadaver. Cadaver storage facility I have already started. Cadaver storage facility will give actually the students that we are dealing with human beings. Otherwise, there will be little more casual on animals, which should not be, the compression should not set in. But the animal skill-based training will be useful because they live anesthetized animal, so they can actually see the breathing, bleeding, etc. So they should become serious. This is what we did during the COVID period as far as skill-based training is concerned, and we have got the technology very beautifully entangled in that, thanks to everybody who was involved. It's a big team approach, including the management who chipped in, and we did everything free of cost for anybody and everybody who was working. Everybody. So that is how we moved, and that is the advantage of being private, as you said. I have to convince only one person. I need not convince the whole system.
Thank you.
Whole system.
Thank you, sir. Can I add a word, sir?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir. I heard the Enopia University as a world-class skill lab. Yes, sir. And we are also planning to visit your center and listening. But, sir, as you know, this type of skill labs is a mandatory as per NMCRI to train our Indian medical graduate to have all the skills. But the issues is maybe many medical colleges across, as you said, maybe more than 500 plus. The skills that required, it should be uniform guidelines, like which term, which MBBS, first phase, second phase, third phase, which phase, what skill has to be taught, and that has to be streamlined. Of course, many medical colleges have their own plans and timetables. That has to be streamlined, and maybe the cost factor, maybe investment cost factors, maybe the government investment, maybe I don't know. Maybe university like Enopia, it is generously established under the leadership of Vijay Kumar sir. It's definitely hats up, appreciable, sir. It is good, but in other centers, this has to be like uniformly training modules, which student has got what skill, maybe giving intravenous or foreign body or in the eye, ear, or they're conducting a simple delivery or taking a pap smear, something, which skill, and how to break the sad news or good news. These skills to be taught, which term and who has those, because each medical college have 100, 200, 250, and where to get the time in this limited shot, that is the issue, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to you on that.
I also thought, coming from government, I worked for 31 years for government before coming here. So I am aware of how to get money from government, to mobilize the money for this particular purpose. Difficulty in the first hand I have suffered for 5 years, I am aware, with due respect to everybody, because they have to distribute to so many people and their priorities may change. So I have one particular statement here which should go on record. Don't try to see private and public as different. All medical colleges are to be treated equally well. And if you are going to look at it, we have spent almost 6 to 7 crores of rupees in establishing this advanced simulation lab, which I don't think everybody should spend at all. They should have one minimum standard, as you rightly said, and if they want to do anything more, they should take advantage of already existing facilities like ours and more than willing to collaborate. And the purpose of the university is to disseminate knowledge, not to make money. This is my view. So you are welcome to government should take advantage. They took really good advantage during COVID. They never bothered whether it is government hospital or private hospital. They took over the management of COVID patients. Is it not? So when they are led the way by taking over around 250 beds to be identified by our hospital, and 250 beds were identified by government for the quarantine facility, which we supported. And every government, every private hospital, be it the college or otherwise, supported. So in the time of crisis when we did it, even in the time of non-crisis, in a commonality, lab come together, collaborate, coordinate, take advantage of everything for the purpose of the country. That is what I would say. Don't try to differentiate between private and public when it requires, and when it is not required, you will immediately say you are a part of the system. That is what I would suggest, that you remember, we are always a part of the system. We are part of India. We are India.
Thank you very much, sir. I think that was a great clarification. In fact, that was my next question to Dr. Ranganath, and you seem to have already answered, because I was worried looking at Karnataka itself. We have only 19 government colleges and we have 41 private colleges. And when you're talking about so much about technology, would our future medical education could get complete disparate treatment for our medical students? And as a result of it, the new generation of medical graduates would have differential learning capacities, or I would say learning exposures. And as a result of it, they'll be very different. But you brought in a beautiful solution saying that collaboration is the way forward, and there is no reason to everybody to spend. And I think this moves from a very important primitive trait of ours, as Swami Vivekananda says, from competition to go into a much mature state of collaboration. I think that's a great movement forward, and highlighting COVID was also great. Now, coming back to Professor Vasudha, actually, I have one important element, because today's generation are very adept in gaming. In fact, they play games even in the midnight. And very recently, in fact, there was jokingly told saying that what happened in Andhra when that gas, this one broke out, it was a PUBG playing kid who actually ensured that so many people survived, because he actually ensured that every day. But now when you are talking about education, it is like a knife, double-edged. The way you use it will actually enable it. So the PUBG was bad, but the PUBG playing time was good for him to save many people in the country. Now we are trying to look at gaming as an important element. How do you think gaming children could be adopted into the normal educational platform? Do you think startups in this country, especially Bangalore being a hub for the largest number of startups, do you think there is an opportunity for you to actually engage with them? What do you feel as an educationist?
Sir, a very nice point. As far as games are concerned, they are attractive because they do something for more than that of traditional teaching methods. If you see the conventional lecture-based teaching, it emphasizes more on information transmission and memory-based teaching. Games are different because the students are engaged in a problem-based approach and possibly to explore a problematic situation. So in this way, what happens is the students have an opportunity to develop higher levels of learning, such as application and analysis. If we see the domains of learning and knowledge being at the level of recall to that of analysis and synthesis and analysis is the highest level in Bloom's taxonomy of learning. So games give the student an opportunity to jump to that level of synthesis and analysis. So they have a feedback mechanism, and they can be designed with a range of levels of difficulty. And one more advantage of having games is that trial and error in games will not have any fatal consequences. And in fact, they are all designed to build the professional skills and teamwork. However, in medical education, it is not considered to be the mainstream of teaching. It is not for the mainstream of teaching for two main reasons. First of all, what are the different pedagogical strategies which are used by the game developers? And secondly, what is the quality of effectiveness of games, which is still not documented effectively? Now, if we see the current use of games in medical education, we usually prefer either simulators or quizzes focused on knowledge retention and skill development through repetition. And we do not demand use of sophisticated games in our classroom. All that we want is those games which help in problem-based approach of learning, or simulations could be for them. But the education, if you see effect of educational effect of games, it can be explained in four broad ways. Behavioristic approach, cognitive approach, humanistic, and constructive kind. So according to behaviorists, learning through games happen through operant conditioning. That is, they prioritize the knowledge transmission. If we see the cognitivism, the learners not only absorb the information indeed, They are also information processors, and their minds are like black boxes, and that needs to be understood. Humanism proposes that a person-centric learning based on values and intentions, and it advocates experiential learning. Finally, if you see the constructivism, it highlights on knowledge construction through problem solving and interaction in the social world. So as of now, if you see the various games, they focus mainly on behaviorism and cognitivism, and we don't have much games which jump to the level of constructivism. And one more important drawback of games in medical education is that some developers publish the URL of that game and they try to sell it, and which can be expensive to use in the and it's not affordable to all medical students. And few developers upload games for free public use, but they don't explain how to access to these games. And most of these games are not published by the prestigious publishing houses. So there should always be a link to the e-learning and game-based learning. So that's a must. Now we have publishers like Elsevier or SciencePub. Now these eminent publishers who are involved with ebooks should link games to them. Only then it will have a better improvement or synchronization in terms of learning. So without this, it is kind of not possible. So keeping this in mind, all that I would conclude is that games are just a supplement for traditional mode of learning, and they cannot replace our traditional based learning approach of medical education and teachings.
Well, thank you very much. I think that was a great, I would say, conclusion. In fact, it's been so apt and supplement what exactly, because technology cannot be cannot supplant all of us, because ultimately in a social sector, there is the humanistic element that cannot be overcome. Because irrespective of all the technological communication that we have, when we meet, we have a different experience. And Dr. Rangnath was saying that in spite of working from home and still working and earning, people had to be treated with counseling on telephone to make them understand. I'm sure everybody is waiting for an opportunity to get out and meet each other. And I think you all re-emphasized the fact, saying that ultimately healthcare is all about teamwork. Probably there is a greater amount of contradictions in some ways, or probably misconceptions on the other side, existing with respect to the different medical systems that exist in this country. And you're aware that the National Health Policy 2017 stresses on harmonization, integrative health system. And when you're talking about integrative health system, in fact, the recent technological, this one of asking people to just feed in whatever they have done during COVID, we saw from Government of India's side 1.47 crore people entering data of what they used without any effort. You remember, there was it was just an app and anybody can feed in or not feed in. It was a choice given, and 1.47 crore people have entered, saying that they have used non-medical, I would say allopathic therapies there. There was another thing that came up, especially dealing with your domain of non-communicable diseases. From 2016 to 2009, I would say it's still ongoing and now it's being scaled up. There was an experiment in 6 districts that was done where a lifestyle clinic and a Ayush practitioner was integrated with a allopathic in a medical college, a district hospital. 6 districts were tried out for 3 years. After that, an independent assessment was carried out in 2019, which was released in this year, 2020. And that assessment showed that amongst diabetes, hypertension, and dyslipidemia, 73% patients reduced dosages of allopathic medicine. 52% had reduced side effects of allopathic medicines. 24% of the people stopped allopathic medicine. 50% had faster recovery, and 22% had said that no significant effect on reducing allopathic medicine and were continuing Ayush medicine along with this one. This is the data that is available on table. Now, coming from our modern medicine system with medical education teaching us exclusivity of only taking this one, what is your take about integrative health system and the way medical education can be taught?
Thank you for the important question.
Your volume.
Most important thing, this is my personal view, and I don't at this point represent probably university's view or my medical college colleagues' view. It's my personal on the subject. I've stayed as working as a doctor. Even today, I am practicing cancer surgeon. Last 40 years, I am in this field. To say that, what I am trying to say is, first and foremost thing, I think we better allopathic medics should accept is our own limitations. If you try to accept that, then you will look for something more. That's the most important thing. We are not able to cure most of the diseases, chronic disease I'm talking. We are only making it prolonged. Can I talk about diabetes? Are we curing diabetes? The answer is no. We are giving insulin to see that the diabetes is under control forever. You stop insulin for 10 days, you will know what will be the outcome. That is what I mean. That if you say you are curing a disease, you treat, and that person should not have diabetes from tomorrow. That status we have not reached. And what are we not talking about cancer? See, because there are these chronic illnesses, hypertension, same thing. You stop treating hypertension, what will happen to the hypertensive patient? You know, I know. When these things of limitations, we try to focus and try to do something about it. Instead, we are talking about some other stream about which I don't have any knowledge. I don't have any knowledge about the other stream till I became a vice chancellor here, and I started looking at the other streams where Ayurveda Medical College has been started by us. That's the second year, it is going on. Homeopathy Medical College Hospital is come, it is going on. That gave me two important inputs from them. When I start talking to them, they are talking about subject, but they are not talking about how they have reached that particular modality of treatment. They do not understand when I say what is clinical trial, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, that they have to put in place, and then only we can treat. They will tell one case they are treated this way, and thereby they have got cured, and so they are talking in that case reports, not about properly conducted, say for example, prospectively conducted randomized controlled trials. They are not talking about it. So I am not complaining. I have started teaching them what is clinical trial. I am telling them they who fall in line in science, then you will be recognized everywhere by doing what we are doing. Conducted properly, conducted randomized controlled trials. This is one thing I started telling. The second most important thing is coming from the background of cancer. One more extra minute I will take you. The most important today, fast-moving chemotherapy drug all over the world is paclitaxel. That paclitaxel came from India. I don't know how many of you know. It came from India. It is the bark of the Himalayan yew tree, yew tree, from where the extract was used. And an observant British army officer who is a doctor saw that being treated. I'm not telling a story, it is there. He took the bark to UK, gave it for R&D department. They took 40 years to find the chemical molecule which was responsible for that bark acting, and that is paclitaxel. Today we are using it for the last 25 years, and that is one of the most fast-moving, effective chemotherapy drugs. This made me feel personally that there can be something working in the Ayurveda, but we don't know what is the molecule. So we are looking at that in our center, in my NFI Advanced Research Center, where I am looking at the pathway, cellular level. I am looking at the pathway of certain drugs which they are claiming that it is anti-cancerous property. For example, Madhunasini. Madhunasini is a drug which is used by Ayurveda people for treatment of diabetes, as the name says, suggests. Madhunasini. So anti-diabetic. But the same way, we are using metformin, which is there as anti-diabetic drug, repurposing it for anti-cancer. So I thought there is some similarities going on. So we try to work on those drugs at the cellular level to look at the pathways, whether they are taking it to which pathway they are going and trying to stop the cancer progression or cancer production. This is what we are doing in our center. What am I trying to say? So many words is we like to keep an open mind, look into what they are talking, and try to see and help those people scientifically how it should come out. If only it comes out like that, then the integration, what you are talking about, need not happen by force, but it will happen naturally. Because everybody is going to talk in the same page, the science, clinical trials, and they are talking, if they have also gone through the clinical trials and the studies are there to support them, then the evidence-based medicine will come into existence in real sense, be it Ayurvedic, be it any other drug. That is how we have to do. The second most important thing our people are worried about is the system specific or disease specific, not patient specific. If the patient is your claim, and you know, I know, during our days, without even asking questions, Leaf 52 was prescribed without knowing what is Leaf 52, at least during my days. Then afterwards, they said, it's an Ayurvedic drug, you should not prescribe. I stopped prescribing, no doubt. But some people thought it was useful for liver support, at least it is being used. So it is integration, according to me, should happen at the lowest level, at the first year level. I don't know how many of you know. I came to know because I'm there in CBC now. Their first year Ayurveda, first year of Ayurveda medicine and anatomy is the same as what we are teaching in MBBS. It is our own teachers are going now teaching it because it is the same curriculum, same syllabus. In no way it is different. But as they grow in their second year, third year, etc., clinical side they go, they take to a different stream. The ABC of it is Greek and Latin, or probably I should say Sanskrit, which I don't understand. So that is the problem. So integration probably should happen at the lowermost level. Then the boys can mix up and come up something. But at the highest level, when it happens, then the problem comes. My ego comes inside. I am an MBBS doctor, which is allopathic medicine, and also let us all accept there's not only ego, there is money in it. So my practice is already taken over by another practitioner, my brother practitioner. Now one more stream person is coming into the picture. To be the group, which probably many of us are objecting what is happening. I am not trying to say you should mix two treatment streams. I didn't say that, and I won't vouch for it. If I am a cancer surgeon today, I can only do cancer. I don't go on to neurosurgery. Am I not accepting it? I don't do
3 minutes.
Am I not accepting it? Like that, different streams are coming for a different purpose. Let them do their job. Allow them to do with an open mind. Integration should happen at the research level. Integration should happen at the applied science level. And so automatically this will happen. And last line from my side, anything imposed is always opposed. So let us not impose, allow the nature to take its own and survive on the fittest. If that system is going to be sound and true, they will survive. Allopathy will disappear. Whatever I do, and the reverse, if they are not productive, they are not showing results, it will be ignored over a period of time by the public, by the patients. Let us be patient-specific, patient-centric, patient-friendly, rather than stream-specific and disease-specific, in my view.
Beautiful. So, thank you, sir. In fact, that was a great, I would say, insight into the entire context of what we are doing and how we are doing things. In the context, we have only just about 3 minutes to go before we close. I would take 1 minute from each of you. Okay. And I would say, I just want to say two things. One, can you just each of you say in 2 sentences, with so much of technology entering into a medical education system and so much of investments going into technology in each of the medical education system, so is going to be there in the healthcare also a point of contact, etc. Do you think the future is bleak for a patient because it is going to become more unaffordable for him? Or on the contrary, how do you think you'll make it affordable to all of us? Can each of you comment on that?
See, affordability, accessibility, and applicability are all three are equally important, and more important is affordability. I agree. And the Ayushman Bharat and Arogya Karnataka is coming now. I was a part and parcel of the Swarna Arogyasri program of Government of Karnataka. When it started, I was the chairperson of the cancer meeting. So I am aware of what all we talk. But if the government, that is the state government or central government, takes over thinking that they will be able to cover everybody without getting money, is unacceptable too. For example, what am I trying to say? There should be a contribution from the patient or people of India. They should pay X amount, it may say 10% of the cost, then they know the value of 90%, number one. Number two, we are now trying to take from people who are more affordable and distribute them to the people who are unaffordable. This also has to change. The unaffordable people also can pay 1 rupee per day. That's more than sufficient. But 1 rupee is possible. And if you do that, I'm not trying to become saying that inhuman. They will know the value. They will not throw and go. Today, anything given free of cost is considered as less value. And that is why many of our brother patients are not coming to the government centers, including Kidwai, where I was chairing, thinking that it is a lesser value. It's one of the best centers in the country. We have developed into that. Why? Because they think anything coming free is of less value. This is one thing I'm insisting on when you are talking about insurance, free treatment, accessibility. Affordability is what? Affordability is most important thing is this. I spoke somewhere else also. You are trying to tell, for example, it is there in Ayushman Bharat, what I'm going to quote, 10,000 rupees you are asking us to do, let us talk 9,000 rupees, cesarean section. I'm not even talking cancer, cesarean section. You know very well, I know very well, it is not possible. So what is possible, what we will have to do? Is it made possible affordability? Next step would be you make the companies which are producing, say for example, staplers, suture material, they should participate in this program, not just private hospitals or private stakeholders. The companies should be made to give free of cost or at the discounted price. Then this 10,000 rupees will make sense. So the patient should be made to pay 10%, 90% should come from outside. That outside should be 1/3 should be by the individual or a hospital like hospitals. 1/3 should be the industry partners should be able to tell, and 1/3 should come from the government. All 90% if the government is going to take over, I'm sorry, what happened to the NHS scheme will happen to us. NHS scheme of UK. I have been sent to the government of Karnataka to study that, to say this. I went there to study that by government of Karnataka deputing me, a team I was one of them. I know what is happening there. Kindly pardon me for saying this. We should not look at short term, but we must look at long term, sustainable. Anything what we do make it affordable should be sustainable. In other words, one line. 1/3 should come from the industry, 1/3 should come from the government, 1/3 should come from the institutions, for example, private hospitals. But 10% at least should come from the patient.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. To continue with what Vijay Kumar sir said right just now, I would say that yes, at the immediate impact, what we are seeing as far as affordability of the patient is concerned, is in terms of Made in India, Make in India project. Now, if you see, to start with, PPE kits costed somewhere around 2,500 rupees, but now it's available for 550 rupees. Same with N95 masks. N95 masks to begin with were affordable for 550 rupees, and now through Janaushadhi we are getting for 25 rupees. Similarly, if we see vaccines and drugs like Remdesivir, which is available in US for a cost of 98,000, is available for somewhere between 20,000 to 25,000 in India. So we would say that an amalgamation or integration of pharmaceutical industry, research at the institutional level, and multidisciplinary integration, wherein we integrate different specialities, would definitely help to bring in cost-effective treatment for the patient. And also, now, particularly if we see the technology should be integrated at the basic science level. So that is the important or salient role to be played to cut down on the cost effectiveness of the patient's health needs. So this
Thank
is
you.
what I want to. Yes.
I just want Dr. Ranganath to contribute on what do you think will be the future of medical education if these are the things which are going to be true?
Yes, sir. As we know, any human tendency, any newer things, maybe initially there may be resistance or hiccups, but when it is made as a law, everybody has to respect and you have to learn. Definitely, whatever the likeness we said, maybe about using this technology or any other things, all the colleges has to follow. Maybe whatever the infrastructure deficiency that has to be followed up, it has to be. Even as now NMC has made this medical graduate should all the 5 qualities as our eminent speaker said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leader, technical, like professionalism, all those things will be learned, and definitely our medical students will be in a due course, definitely will implement all the medical colleges uniformly through these universities and through NMCs, definitely will come up with the whatever the Indian medical graduate should be qualifications as a competent physician or a competent healthcare person, definitely, sir.
Thank you very much. In fact, it was very entertaining and educative for all of, for me especially, to understand the context of medical education in this country at large and state in specific. In fact, I'm equally excited to share with you that if I take the state of Karnataka itself, with just hardly about 4,000 Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Centers, which have been rolled out today as of date, because we have a target of nearly 12,000 to be reached, and we are just 1/3 the target there. But if I take back onto this one, the teleconsultations that are happening at the sub-center level with only 1/3 has already started reaching 7 lakhs. Okay, in other words, we are almost tracking almost 1 lakh per month is the number of teleconsultations happening at the grassroots level. Okay, so that means technology is not limited to your institutions of colleges which are existing over there, but people at the grassroots level have also started connecting, and this is going to transform healthcare enormously, and it would also be equally demanding on the practitioners elsewhere, because many people would say technology has actually given us convenience, but at the same time it is at the cost of the time that all of us have, because now you're accessible and available all the time. Okay, so fortunately, we would look at the leveraging the best for the betterment of the humanity at large. And I'm sure you're going to actually energize your own institutions and be a model for the new generation of medical education graduates coming out of this country. And I'm sure they'll not only be the best pick in the world at large, but it will be the most humane lot serving our own citizenry. Thank you very much for your wonderful time and enormous sharing of information at this point of time, Dr. Kulkarni, Dr. Ranganath, and Dr. Vijay Kumar. And I also giving me an opportunity to be a moderator amongst all of you. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.